Um,
In progress.
Does it go back? All right. Let me
Good boy,
just make
buddy.
sure it all
Good
worked.
boy.
Wonderful. All right. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay in getting started. We'll let people get online here and then we will kind of get going. If you're joining us live by Facebook or Zoom, feel free to tell us in the comments where you're joining us from. And if you have questions, if you're on Zoom, you can click the Q&A button and type your questions in there. If you're on Facebook live, you can type your questions in the comments. And I am very pleased to introduce Pad's client and a wonderful friend, Brad McCannell. And somewhere in there hiding is Mr. Sandy,
Yeah.
who is a Pad's service dog. So um, Brad, I'm going to kick things off the way I always do and ask you the question that I ask everybody at the beginning. How is it you came to be part of the PADS family and a PADS client?
To be honest, am I muted? Looks like I'm muted. If you can
I
hear me,
can't,
I'm assuming you can hear me.
we can hear you.
Honestly and truly, this goes back a ways. This goes back, just looking at the wall. Me and Montana hooked up in April of 1999, and I started the process in about 2 years before that. But I was very reluctant. I thought I love the idea of having that kind of support and help, but did I really need a dog in my life? Did I really need to go out and pee at midnight and first thing in the morning? Did I need any of that actual looking after another being? And a big part of me was like, oh, geez, is it worth it? And my darling wife stressed to me about the advantages, and most of them are preventative. I'm a pretty independent guy, and one of calling cards is my fierce independence. And then I thought, well, if I get a dog, that I'm conceding. I don't want it. And my darling wife looked at me and said, it'll just make it easier. And so I got introduced to Montana, and Montana is something of a legend in his own mind. And he was an amazing service dog. And I learned right away that it wasn't about losing independence. It was about maintaining independence. It was about, I could pick things up off the floor, but the more I did that, the more I wrecked my shoulders, the more I wrecked my back. And just having Montana there to do even that. And then I realized how great it was that he could pull me. And then I realized how great it was that he could make me laugh. And one of the things that I need as a person, or not a person, I think of them as people, as someone to make me laugh was a big, big deal. And Montana had an uncanny lack of not being able to make me laugh and make things good. So I learned very quickly that it wasn't about losing independence, it was about gaining and maintaining. And then Montana just changed my life, and off we went. And so the other thing I hadn't realized was what an asset he was for my business, because people may not remember me, but they always remembered Montana. And so it was like leaving a business card behind by leaving a pile of dog hair on the carpet when you left. So that was a long way of saying I was reluctant, but once I did it, oh man. So I went, and Montana was with me for 13 years, and then Chip came along, and Chip was a whole different, same breed. I'm not sure same breeder, but same dog, same breed, same training, same everything, completely different dog, night and day. And I always joked that Montana was great once you got his attention. Don't use force, use a bigger hammer. But Chipper was the exact opposite. He was so intuitive, so on top of it. He was an old soul that knew before I knew what I wanted. He was amazing, I was with Chipper for 11 years, so that was pretty good. And I've never had a lab before, so enter Sandy into the picture. And boy, are labs ever different than retrievers? Holy smokes! And he's I was warned, because I'm something of a legend. I do lose my mind sometimes, and I do use the 7 words you can't use on television, never in front of anybody, but when I'm in the car by myself, or want to hit the mute button. Hit the mute button. And Rob said to me, Sandy's pretty sensitive, you got to be careful with that. And I have noticed at the very moment I start thinking evil, horrible, rage thoughts, he gets uncomfortable and he will come over and he will go, is it me? Is it me? I don't want it to be me. And he will immediately, he's changed me. He's made me think twice about doing that stuff. And it's a good thing. I needed some moderating there. So I've got a moderator in my life, but he is different than any other dog I've ever been around. He's so sensitive. He's so smart, but he's also a much tougher train. Chipper and Montana. Well, Chipper had 109 word vocabulary by the time we ended it all. And getting Sandy to learn one word. I've been working on this for like with Chipper, you just say, yeah, I need you to get your dish. Just get your dish. And that took about 8 minutes for him to figure out. I've been working on this now with Sandy for about a month. And he's starting to figure out, oh, dish, a dish. So it's harder to train them between the labs, at least this lab, and so I'm being tested that way. But I've learned none of them are the same, even if it's the same breed, and they're certainly not machines. If you don't just turn them on and they work. And so, especially with Sandy, he's so sensitive and so. You got to be careful because he grounds right away, and that's it. It's over. So that's how I got here. That was a long, circuitous route to saying I didn't want him. Once I did, it changed my life, and it's the best thing I ever did.
Well, and I love how you touched on how different each dog is and how they bring unique strengths and weaknesses, and that just like us humans, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And I also know, having been a puppy raiser for a long period of time, is that like you forget how hard it was at the beginning, because when you're at the end and they have the 120 words and then you're going back to like 30 or 40 words and you're kind of starting over, right? And so yes. I think it's always interesting to see. So for those of you that have just signed on, I know we've got a few more people on here since we went live and introduced. We're here with third-time PODS client, Brad McCannell. And somewhere in the background is Mr. Sandy, who is a lovely yellow Labrador. And if you're just joining us, you can ask questions on Zoom by clicking the Q&A box. Or if you're watching on Facebook Live, then you can type your questions into the comment section and we will try and answer them, sorry. And I think Nicole said that you answered her question, which was how are the dogs different? So Carol Ann is asking, how old is Sandy?
3 and a bit. I think.
3 and a bit.
I don't know. I should know his birthday, shouldn't I? It's terrible. But I know he when went through training with Rob, I think he was 3. And it's a little bit later than I got the other dogs, but I don't see any downside to that so far.
November 7th, 2017. So
November 7th, you say?
November 7th. There you go.
Oh,
like all these things at my fingertips.
Well, there you go. So I'm still learning about this guy.
Yeah.
Happy to know that.
Well, and I had the unique pleasure of going through team training with Brad and Sandy with Cadence in early December, early November. I can't remember. I think
yes, maybe January, somewhere in there.
Yeah. And which was especially interesting because it was done out at the airport. And I think that's the other fascinating thing about Brad is what Brad does for a living. So he had some lovely insights into the airport, et cetera. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do when you're not playing, fun and games and nonsense with Sandy?
I have been a professional access consultant for over 30 years. I am the access consultant for Vancouver International Airport, and I have been since 1991. So we've had a long time. I got to build the International Terminal building, and I got to really work on the culture out there and make people understand the gap between building code and the real needs of the community, people with disabilities. And it's been such a pleasure working at YVR. We've been I think this is year 4 of the best airport in North America, and a huge part of that is customer service. And a huge part of that is how we respond to people with disabilities and their needs, and older adults and seniors, and that whole package. And so I am very, very happy to be working with YVR still. It's been 30 years. And it's funny because I went on there on a $650 purchase order to do some consulting on the boardroom, and that was it. And we just kept rolling over the PO. And so I got to work with really, really interesting high-end people to build the International Terminal building. And what was really special is they listened. I've worked with lots of people who took the reports and just buried them. But YVR actually acted on them, and I'm very, very pleased with that building. It's got some really unique features. As I was going through with Tara, you have to point them out because we don't show them unless you need them. Like, for example, the little wheelchair guy, the little blue stick man, he's hard to find at YVR. That's because everything was made universal. Everything works for everyone. And so we didn't put the little sticker there. It's not on the washrooms because all the washrooms are accessible. It's not, it's not, the only place you'll see it is on the seating in the hold rooms where they try to hold some seats for people with mobility impairments. But after that, you won't see the guy because that's the point. It's accessible to everyone. I've been able to take that knowledge we've gained there. I've taken it literally around the world. I was the access consultant for Kuala Lumpur's International Airport in Malaysia, Dallas, Fort Worth, Heathrow, where else? All over the world. It turned me into a specialist on access to public buildings and terminals. So that they allowed me to do things at YVR. Just sometimes you have to test because we know these things, but we've never really beta tested them, really, honestly. And so at YVR, one of the things, for example, if you're standing on tile or terrazzo, you're connected to an exit. If you're standing on carpet, you're connected to a gate. And if you're on anything else, you're in retail. So that's important information for people with vision loss, especially people who are blind. And so what we do, that's not a standard, that's just what we do. And we try to promote those kind of operating off textures and wayfinding in an airport. Wayfinding in any public building is a real challenge. So by using textures and using floors and using surfaces, we even use scent and sound at YVR. Anybody who's familiar with it, you may know the waterfall on the baggage hall. That's a really handy visual. It's called soundscaping in the vision loss world. We can simply say, go to the waterfall and turn right and you're in baggage. And that's huge. For everybody else, it's a pretty waterfall, yeah. But for the people who need it, we can use sound, we can use scent. We've got scented gardens we use as guidance. We use the floor, we use everything in our power to make people equal in the airport. And I think it worked because we do exit surveys all the time. And year before last, we focused on people with disabilities and older adults and seniors. And the question was, how did you find the airport? And the answer was, it was great. Why? Don't know. Perfect answer. Because if you don't know, then you weren't handled separately. You weren't separated off and had to use a special counter. I didn't have to send somebody to take you somewhere. It was all accessible. It all worked just fine. You were treated like everybody else. So if you don't know, that means my job was perfect. So I do that all the time. I specialized in the large things. So during the Olympic Games, I did 2008 in Beijing, which was the largest Paralympics ever held. And I did the entire site and event planning for 2010 here in Vancouver. But I also I didn't work in Sochi. I had a little falling out with the Russians, but I worked in Rio de Janeiro. I worked in the UK for the London Games. I've been part of the Olympic movement for quite a while now. So that's really cool because when the circus comes to town, when the Olympics comes to town, it's all full on and then you need access for everyone everywhere. So it's a wonderful challenge. That's where I learned most of my stuff, actually, because you have to find ways. You just have to find ways. So I'm happy to talk about access. As you can see, I tend to go on and on and on about it. So the best thing to do is for me to shut up and wait for a question, I think.
Well, we do have a question. Hang on a sec. Let me just pop it up here. Is it possible to call Sandy on screen? We've got a couple of clients.
Yeah, come here. Come here. Come here. Come here, over here. Come here. Up. There you go. There's Sandy.
Oh,
Oh, he exists. Oh, you damn dog. He exists. He exists. But it's really hard for him to get into this space. I just wanted you to say hello. That's all. All right, go back to bed. Back to bed.
he's like, what do I need to do now? So,
He's a liquor, I'll tell you that much. Ugh.
so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to just pop them into the Q&A box on Zoom or the Facebook comment section on Facebook Live, and we will ask them. I'm just scrolling through to see if there's a bunch of comments, but mostly people saying hello from various parts of the world.
Well, that's
So
cool.
welcome everyone, and we're glad that you're here. Brad, do you want to talk a little bit? I think it'd be interesting to hear what's it like traveling with these guys? Because certainly you were not someone that Moss grows on, and so you know, and I know you've in your work with the airport, you've put thought into as well how are service animals accommodated kind of in those spaces, and so what is that like? So when you go off and do these things,
What Chip gets credit for the relief area, animal relief areas at YVR. He gets credit because there's one outside, there should be two outside, there's two inside now, and that inside was a big hard push. Because you know, you go through security, you don't want to have to go back out again if the plane's delayed or your timing's wrong and you got a dog that has to pee and go all the way through security again. So Chipper convinced management at YVR that they needed an indoor inside post-security animal relief area. And it was because of Chip. It was because of his presence in the corporate culture at YVR that they understood the need. And because they learned to love Chip as much as I do, that need became front and center. And we actually got them to convert two washrooms that were formerly unisex washrooms, family rooms. I don't know what we call them these days, universal rooms. Everybody's got a different name for them. But we converted two of them into animal relief areas. And what a difference that, you know, for traveling with a service animal, but anybody traveling with any, mostly dogs, but being able to not go outside again, that was mammoth. And we were ahead of the whole curve on that. It's now a requirement in American airports and in, I believe, airports in the UK. But we were way ahead of this curve, and it was because Chipper was so charming. He convinced Bob Cowan and the engineers over there that this was a really important thing because, you know, as I explained to them, they didn't recognize the need until they were exposed to Chip and all that whole world. And I kept saying to them, if you build it, they will go. And that's the bottom line. They're going to go anyway. If we don't make a place, they're going to go in the closest garden. They're, you know, and that's not going to be where you want it. It's going to be the closest garden, or there's going to be a turd on the sidewalk or something. So, you know, getting that mind shift over. So that was a real wonderful thing. Traveling with a service dog, well, it just depends where you're going. You know, like going to Toronto or something's no big whoop. Except the airlines are still really hard. They don't understand. They think a dog the size of Sandy or a dog the size of Chip can go under the seat in front of you. What the hell are you talking about? You know, you need the space, and they won't let us sit on the bulkheads anymore because they say it's a risk because if they have to use the emergency doors, which all the Airbuses put their emergency doors on the bulkhead seats, then because you can't move out of the way, then you're an impediment to exit. And then it's always funny because the stewardess will come over, sorry, flight attendant will come over and say, okay, in case of an emergency, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get everybody else off the plane, and then we're going to come back for you. Okay, so if you just sit there and wait, no, I'm not going to sit there and wait. I'm not going to wait for you to come back for me. What are you, nuts? Me and my dog are going to get the hell out of this plane. But space for the dog is the big problem on airplanes these days. And the whole movement of comfort animals set us back decades, because we had people showing up with pot-bellied pigs. We had one person show up with a peacock that they couldn't fly without because they needed to be calmed. No, that's not what you need. I'm afraid you need something else other than that. And so it really hurt us. And the other thing that really hurt us was the St. John's ambulance guys, St. John's first aid guys. They just did a program about comfort dogs, and they bring dogs in the airport, and the idea was you could pet them and feel better. Well, that's nice, and that's good. I wouldn't allow them to come into YVR wearing vests, because we've spent decades telling people don't pet dogs wearing vests. And then these guys show up with a bunch of vests and it says pet me. And so YVR came to me. So how do you feel about this? I said, no, I can't allow it. What they need to do is have a brightly colored collar and a brightly colored leash, and maybe a sign on their back says pet me. But you can't have them in harness. If they look like professional dogs, then people are going to pet them. They're going to pet my dog. And so again, YVR stepped up and said, nope, we're not going to let that. So the dogs at YVR that are comfort dogs have bright collars and long leashes, and it's very clear that they're not working animals. But in other airports, it's a big battle because, you know, how many times are we going to go through this? Don't pet the working dog. Well, that dog's a working dog. Yeah. So that's part of that whole travel scene. But, you know, the other big thing about travel is the hotels. And the hotels have come so far in the last 10 years. When I first started showing up with a dog, it was, first off, they wanted to charge you for the pet fee. You know, it cost an extra $90 a night because they got a vacuum with a special vacuum or something. And so that's not acceptable. Now it's shifted right around. Like when you phone ahead, I get to most hotels, there's a dog bed, there's a dog dish. They'll offer someone to come out and take your dog out at night for you. And why do they do that? Well, because they recognize we got a problem here. If we don't do that, then we can't contain the mess. We can't contain the hair. If this guy just takes his dog up, he's going to just poop anywhere. So if we take them out, we can control where they poop. So they realized to get control of the situation, they had to offer it. And I haven't been to a hotel that didn't do that now for, I don't know, well, COVID's kind of screwed everything up, but the last couple of years, even the lower end stuff, you know, the 2 stars, I travel a lot on low budget, and it's sometimes you go into, you know, Motel 6 level places, and it was always a worry. But even those, they're stepping up really big time, and the problems with traveling now are related to disability more than they are dogs. So I haven't had that much trouble. Now the last year, nobody's gone anywhere, so it's hard to really judge. But last time I was doing the circuit from Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa, Halifax. I was doing it 6-7 times a year, and you can just see the progress. You know, the big hotels have come a long, long way, but like I say, the smaller groups, the I guess 2-star, maybe 3-star hotels are finally realizing this isn't about, well, it's about customer service, but it's really about containing the mess and containing how far the hair goes all over the place, and if they do it right, they can not only make it a customer service issue, but they can reduce their maintenance costs.
Well, and I think it's interesting how, going back to your first comment about kind of, you know, if something is designed kind of universally, it doesn't have to be, that you're being singled out. And what's interesting is I've found, you know, when I first started traveling with puppies and training, there was a lot of challenges, but what I'm finding now is so many different businesses are becoming pet friendly, but by the same token, it's made it easier. And strangely, they've become more educated about service dogs in the process. And so it's interesting how sometimes, you know, the pressures can come from kind of multiple directions. I know the app that I use to book hotels now, like I can actually filter by, you know, hotels that are pet friendly, which generally speaking also means that they're just a little bit more educated around the working dogs as well. So I've had really good experiences there.
Yeah,
So
I
for
think
those,
that's generally the other thing that's really pushed that along is people using hearing dogs.
Mhm.
You know, that was it was different enough that people started paying attention, and they went, oh, I get it now. And so I've talked to a lot of hotel operators who said that when hearing dogs showed up, it suddenly occurred to them that this is something different that they have to pay attention to. I don't know what about that made them do that, but I don't care either. whatever works, right?
Yeah. long as everybody's online. So we are getting close to time here. So if there's any last minute burning questions from anyone, please feel free to throw them in the comments or the Q&A box and we will try to answer them. But any last thoughts, Brad? Any advice for anyone looking to get a service dog or considering one? You know, best part, worst part of having a service dog?
If you're thinking about it, stop thinking about it. Just do it. Take the leap. It'll change your life. It's the most amazing thing in the world. And if you get one, what I constantly reinforce all my dogs. I'm constantly talking to them. They're always in training mode, even when we're playing. One of the things I really need I need to be able to steer a dog, because I often leave things in odd places and you can't use a command to get just one command. So I like to be able to turn them left, right, back, turn, all that stuff. And so I reinforce that. Like one of the things that, like Sandy has had to learn, I live right on a lake. That's a Labrador. Guess where he wants to be all the damn time. So getting him to understand the concept of weight on the deck, it's a giant deck, it's just weight. It was like pulling teeth. So I had to make the deck a fun place to be. And I wanted to reinforce all the steering commands. So what I do is in the morning when he's off busy doing other things, I will just plant little bits of kibble all over the deck. Some will be under a planter, over this, on a table, it's all over the place. And we will use, when it's playtime, I will use those steering commands. I will get them to go, go, go. Look, 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 look. Now look up is one, and look under is another one. So I need him to be able to look under the bed, for example. So how do I get him to do that? Well, there's kibble under the bed. So when he's doing it, I'm saying, look under, and he gets the look and the under. And so we reinforce, constantly reinforce. So for him, it's a fun game. Go find, there's kibble, go find. But I use the commands and reinforce them. Even when we're for a walk, if he's on a release and we're just wandering around the property, I've got about a half acre here. And if I see him going to pee, I will say to him, you better go now. Because I want it to be my idea and I want to reinforce that that's a good thing and it's a command. So constantly working with them. But what that does is it keeps you sharp as well as a partner. And so first advice, get a dog. I know it seems daunting. I know people have gotten dogs and it didn't work out. Well, sometimes it doesn't work out. But I think that the intangibles of how they will change your life are spectacular. And the best thing about service dogs in my life has been they make me laugh. They're the greatest icebreaker in the world. If you're a person with a disability, often, well, your mother taught you not to stare, right? So people tend to not look at you. It's kind of annoying, but when you have a service dog, gosh, everything changes. Everybody wants to talk to you. Everybody sees and does. So, I've watched service dogs melt away any resistance in a room. I've come into hostile rooms. I deal with a lot of hostile rooms. Architects don't like me. Owners don't like me. I'm going to cost them money. But if I come in with Sandy, everybody loves me. So it's the intangibles. Yeah, they do all the work and they carry and they pull and they do and they lift. Thank God they do that. But what they really do is provide you that entry into almost any room and to create that laugh. They break the tension, whatever you have. I've been driving down the road. This was a Chip experience. And I kind of lost my mind at a driver who wasn't driving the way I thought he should. And I started using the 7 words again. And it was funny because Chip just laying in the back of the van. He got up, he walked up to the front, and he just stuck his head in my lap. He said, come on, pet me. Come on, pet me. You want to. You'll feel better. You'll feel better. And he was right. I did feel better. And I stopped being tense and life was good. And he went back to bed. So it's the intangibles more than it is. Yes, they do great things. And yes, they do really practical things. But it's the intangibles that'll change your life. And once you've had a service animal in your life, you won't ever want to be without one.
Yeah. Could not agree more. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm chuckling because our friend Terry, who may rival you for time in the air, he works for American Airlines and he's one of our puppy and flight volunteers. So he flies our young pups to and from different schools. But he says, thanks so much for your comments on airports and hotels. I know Terry's someone who really appreciates when airports put things in place to accommodate service animals, because he's often, you know, how hard it is to travel with a full-grown dog who might have a full bladder. Imagine an 8-week-old puppy. So yeah, so he gets the opposite end of the spectrum, but the accommodations that are put into place for folks with disabilities and service dogs benefit him as well. So
And
anyway,
just a little note on that, the Airports Council International it's so taken with what YVR has done in that the YVR is running tours now. So other airports fly into Vancouver for the sole purpose of seeing what they've done, access in general, but specifically for the service dogs and any animals. And so
well, and
that's going right around the world now.
And I think the amazing part, you know, how we spent close to a week there in chairs, and I think the part that's been hard for me, having been somebody able-bodied and then transitioning into a chair for some of the time, was how many barriers are out there in the world. How many places I go that, you know, I go into a store and there's aisles that I can't get down, and it's just challenges that I never saw before. And yet at YVR, I never experienced that, right? Like there wasn't anywhere that I kind of went, well, I can't get in here. And so that's pretty fabulous, right? So fabulous work on your part. Thank you for joining us today, Brad. This, as always, is such a pleasure. It's always nice to catch up with you. Very, very special thank you to our lovely Lanny behind the scenes. That is
Lanny.
Lanny well, and Lanny has done a valiant job of keeping up with two very fast talkers. So, oh, and we have a comment from somebody watching that says, I too used to work at the airport in YYC. Such good news. It's about time, and glad that you're sharing this knowledge with Brad. So, and oh, and I love this. Sabrina and Leanne just shared, against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. Mark Twain quote. So yes, we enjoy the laughter that these crazy animals bring to us, and the joy and the freedom. So big thank you from a few people watching. Brad, we know you're a busy guy, so we appreciate that you took time to be here with us today.
Oh, you gotta, I gotta, you know, I every time you ask, I try. Sometimes I can't, but you know, you guys do the greatest work there is. You know, without this kind of support, I'm nowhere. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Well, and we've said this before, but we'll say it again, that, you know, when our facility down the road comes into planning, you're our guy. So
yes, please.
Yeah. So,
you know, it's the why there was a comment about YYC, and YYC and YVR are the two gold airports under the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Program. And so the message is getting out there, guys. It's happening. Like pulling teeth, but it's happening.
But it's happening. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll chat again soon, but thanks for being here.
I met your beck and call, or you're back. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.